Pursuit of Truth. This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. All right, Patriots, stretch your hammies, grab your coffee, fist bump your neighbor, give him a little bro nod. You know the bro nod. It's like an upward nod, like, hey, what's up? You want to get pursuity? And your neighbor be like, yeah, what's up? I do. Yeah, do that. Anyway, we're talking about Nancy Pelosi today. We are talking about Hawaii. We're talking about the great state of Virginia, a little bit about impeachment, and much more. So let's do it! Starting you off today from the Military Times, the FAA reports Navy exercise near Florida to cause widespread GPS interference. Pilots flying over the southeast United States and the Caribbean may experience unreliable or unavailable GPS signal throughout January, according to a flight advisory from the Federal Aviation Administration. The U.S. Navy's Carrier Strike Group 4 out of Naval Station Norfolk, Virginia, will be conducting training exercises off the coast of Georgia, affecting GPS and associated navigation systems from January 16th to January 24th. The disruptions will occur as low as 50 feet above ground level within 207 miles of the testing location and as high as 40,000 feet within 460 miles. The FAA is encouraging pilots to report anomalies and frequently check notices to airmen for the most recent updates. And as you can see, there's the scope of it right there. Wow, it's almost like you could go to Cuba and nobody would know. According to the U.S. Coast Guard's Navigation Center, the federal government is required to conduct GPS tests, training activities, and exercises that involve interfering with GPS receivers. In early February 2019, Carrier Strike Group 4 conducted similar GPS interference testing in the same area. Through January 30th, there are additional flight advisories issued for similar GPS interference testing exercises out of Fort Hood, Texas, Yuma Proving Grounds, Arizona, Cannon Air Force Base, New Mexico, and Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Okay, so this was originally the southeast United States, and now it looks like it's covering much of the southwest, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and of course North Carolina, which is not in the southwest. The global positioning system Constellation is provided by the DoD. Routine testing is conducted on the GPS, said an FAA representative. The FAA issues advisories to inform operators that they may experience interference with or disruption of their GPS navigation systems in the vicinity of the testing. These exercises are likely part of a continuing emphasis on confronting emerging threats in the electronic warfare realm. Military officials and defense industry leaders have grown increasingly weary about interference with position, navigation, and timing services. Okay, well, this is indeed curious, and I do want to point out that I think they mean to say wary, increasingly wary. Weary means you're tired. Wary means you beware. Anyway, okay, so we have a lot of really interesting and quite frankly unnerving events that seem to be overlapping, not just throughout this weekend, but throughout the week and really leading up until the end of the month. Now I'm taking you over here to ZeroHedge, where they're calling this out too, and they're saying in case you don't fully realize that something big is about to take place in America, file these two facts. Number one being what we just talked about. The U.S. military Carrier Strike Group 4 is jamming GPS signals from January 16th to the 24th. And this is the statement from the FAA here. And as you can see, of course, this is the Southwest. And I was being snarky, but we have seen some curious flights going back and forth to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And this seems like a great time to move some high value either prisoners or people or retrievals, or I don't know. But if you wanted to make some flights and get away from the radar, this might be a great time to do it. And keep in mind, I just pointed out that this isn't just happening in the southeast United States, but it is also happening in the southwest. And it seems to be overlapping Virginia, where we talked about in my last video. We have this event that's going to be happening today, this Lobby Day event in regards to gun control, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But this is all happening at the same time in the southeastern area of the United States as well as the southwest. And of course, Tyler Durden at ZeroHedge is pointing this out. Note that this is the U.S. military testing GPS jamming capabilities in anticipation of an event that would require such jamming, obviously. Consider the convergence of events now shaping up. So first of all, we have the impeachment trial of President Trump by the U.S. Senate, presided over by the treasonous sellout SCOTUS Justice Roberts, who already sold out America to Obama under the wildly unconstitutional Obamacare decision years ago. Yes, and I believe it was Ted Cruz just came out and said they were going to be making some decisions on Tuesday as to what they're going to do as far as calling witnesses. Now, I don't want to talk too much about impeachment as of now because, quite honestly, I think that is the outward show. That is the narrative for the public, right? And, of course, we've got this quote-unquote dream team, which is far from a dream team. We've got Kenneth Starr. We've got the Dersh, of course, representing the POTUS. This seems very, very interesting, and, of course, it's very reminiscent of the Bill Clinton impeachment, right? And I think that is definitely by design. I'm not exactly sure why, but I think we all know that there probably is some sort of planning that goes along with this. I think there were other people that could have been chosen, but I think they're doing this very, very specifically to make it reminiscent of the Bill Clinton impeachment trial, likely to set up the Democrats for their own failure. But either way, we're going to find out more Tuesday. Now, the second event, of course, is the January 20th Lobby Day, which for many of you will be today by the time you're watching this video, event in Richmond, Virginia, where deep state operatives are absolutely trying to put together a false flag event to cause violence and blame gun owners. And we talked a lot about this in my last video entitled Sweet Virginia. We didn't cover this GPS jamming event, but we do know that Northam is kind of calling for everyone's guns out there, right? And we have a lot of different local sheriffs that are deputizing people, and this is seeming to really, really ramp up. And I also pointed out that we have a lot of Israeli intelligence and security companies that are going to be moving in towards the end of the month, which I suggested they likely may even be there. Now, keep in mind, this may involve all kinds of things involving security and intel. We talked a lot about it. This was military, this was security, this was cameras, this was night vision, this was drones, this was all kinds of things, AI, you name it. If it had to do with the military-industrial complex, they're going to be showing up in Virginia, invited by Governor Northam. Now, we also know that local police are going to be out in full force, and we also know that this area is a closed-in area, which suggests to me danger Will Robinson. So we also know that Ham Bifa is going to be there. And if you don't know who Ham Bifa is, you're just going to have to look at the screen and figure it out for yourself. So this is an invitation to trouble, and all of this is happening right around the same time. Now we get these mysterious drone flights over Colorado, Oklahoma, and Nebraska, recently followed up by an emergency meeting with the Oklahoma legislature on a military base. And we talked about that the other day too. They basically whisked everybody away, and they basically said, hey, drop everything, get on the bus. We need to take you downtown, where we can show you our sweet new pad, right? It was all very curious. All these people were saying that this was a very, very abnormal thing. They were told to get on this bus and they were taken to a secure site. But when they all came back, they all said this was totally normal. Not normal. Where they were briefed about something horrific and life-altering. Yeah, we knew that this had to do with some sort of security issue, and we suspected it may have to do with a foreign attack. So were we talking about China? Are we talking about our agriculture? We know that that's what they were briefed on, but we don't really know exactly what this is, but it has something to do with an impending attack. And so we have now the Southwest, the Midwest, and the Southeast all seems to be covered. That's a big area. The FBI's sudden attempts to confiscate high-end night vision tubes from distributors, indicating an emergency need for night vision capabilities in an agency led by a treasonous traitor, Christopher Wray, and that has a long history of planning and carrying out terrorism plots across America, according to the New York Times and the Kansas City Star. All right, so this is very curious too. And if you guys have watched Red Pill 76's last video with Marfugal News, they were talking a lot about this. You guys don't need to send that to me. I watched them, so I'm the subscriber, just like you guys are, so I'm notified of their videos. But yeah, indeed, some pretty interesting stuff. They're wanting to seize all these night vision tubes, which suggests that they seem to need more of this. And of course, if they're going to be cutting power, if they're going to be jamming signals, it seems to be like they'd be taking it away from certain people and putting it in the hands of others. And keep in mind, I also just mentioned the Israeli security companies moving in. They might be in need of night vision because they have companies specifically dedicated to night vision that I showed you in my last video, moving into town, invited by Ralph Northam. So let's go more into this. The FBI is now claiming eminent domain to essentially seize high-end night vision tubes that power night vision goggles from distributors in the United States. This indicates the FBI has an emergency effort underway to acquire large numbers of night vision devices in anticipation of some urgent event which will take place at night, possibly another FBI false flag operation like Oklahoma City or the 1993 attempted WTC, you know what, which was entirely masterminded by the FBI. Okay, so we start getting into opinion there, but I'm not necessarily saying that it's far off either. What we do know is if they're seizing night vision, it's because they need something to be seen at night. And I don't know if this is more about putting it in the hands of someone or taking it away from someone. But either way, we seem to know that there's something very urgent going on, and it all seems to be going down throughout this week towards the end of the month. Now, a lot of you have been sending me screenshots from what appears to be this article right here by Wizard PC from gunscarstech.com. No big deal! Just a special operations surveillance aircraft circling Richmond. 4 days from now, on Monday, January 20th, 2020, the Virginia Citizens Defense League is holding their annual lobby day at the Virginia State Capitol in Richmond, Virginia. There's been a lot of contentiousness this year. Among other things, the governor has declared a state of emergency and probably unlawfully declared the state capitol grounds a gun-free zone. Yeah, and you're correct about that. It is unlawful. I say that because of this. At this hour, there is a U.S. Air Force U-28A aircraft circling the Capitol. And as you can see, there is a perfect circle going around there. Now, there's a lot of interesting things in this area. We'll talk a little bit more about this. Highland Park up here, the museum district right here, that may be very relevant. And if you've seen my video entitled "What the Frick is Going On?", you know that we covered Jeffrey Epstein's neighborhood in New York and how he lived very close proximity to shoot a lot of people, the Pope, Bill Cosby, but notably in that video, the Frick Center Museum, which of course has a massive network of tunnels under there. And although I don't want to get wrapped up in the tunnel idea, I think that if you follow my channel long enough, we're always suspecting that, and the museum district is in the area. But let's move on. The U-28A is a modified single-engine Pilatus PC-12 aircraft and is part of the Air Force Special Operations Command Manned Airborne Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance Fleet. And there is a screenshot of it right there, not a very big plane. Operational squadrons include the 319th, 34th, and 318th Special Operations Squadrons, and the 5th and 19th SOS conduct the airframe's formal training. I want to stop there again. Now, this may be nothing at all, but I do want to point out that a few videos ago, I made a big point when this was earlier last month, when the Trump administration came out with this list of achievements. You may remember us talking about this, and if you don't, you may remember this event. But they came out with 319 achievements. 5 categories, 319 achievements. And I pointed out back then that that was a very curious number to choose, and I wondered if it was referencing something else. Now, the list was official. There was an official list that came out with 319th achievements, so it doesn't necessarily mean that the outward story is always fake, but I thought the number was very, very interesting. And of course, we later found out that there was an attack on Soleimani. There were a lot of aircraft in the area looking for this quote-unquote Christmas gift that Kim Jong-un over there in North Korea was promising us. We were expecting missiles is what we were talking about. And I pointed out then that a lot of that fleet that not only was searching for whatever would have been going on in North Korea, likely would have been the same fleet that would have been going after Soleimani. I pointed that out very specifically with the aircraft and the drones, some of them belonging to the 319th. So I thought this number was interesting, and I thought it was interesting that this is popping up again. And of course, the 319th Squadron is a pretty big squadron, so I'm not necessarily saying that it is a direct relation, but I am pointing it out because I find it interesting. And I also referenced this in my last video. You remember this story from which would have been the very next day. This article I'm reading is from the 16th. On the 17th, we had this Delta airline. The plane nose gear exits taxiway at Kansas City International Airport. And I pointed out then, too, that although I don't think the Delta flight was of that much note, because obviously planes need to get de-iced, runways need to get de-iced, but they shut the airport down. And there was a little bit of conflicting stories about whether or not they were actually de-icing. I don't want to get into so much whether or not they were de-icing, because like I said, the story could be legitimate. But I want to memorize you of this. It was an Airbus 319. And I pointed out just the other day that I thought that was curious, and I wondered if it was another shout out to another story. So again, here we have the U-28A, modified single-engine Pilatus, flying around from the 319th Squadron. Probably just another coincidence, just pointing it out. It circled that area for about 2 hours before flying southeast towards Yorktown Naval Weapons Station. The jagged lines are due to the aircraft being picked up by different receivers. Once the altitude dropped below 2,000 feet, I lost it. And so they're giving you an idea of where this was. And look at this. We have the U.S. Naval Supply here, but right here we have Camp Peary. Honestly, I had never heard of Camp Peary, but because I love you guys, I wanted to look up what was there. You have got to be kidding me. Okay, well, if you follow this channel, you don't necessarily have to follow this channel to know what Camp Peary is, but we've talked a lot about Camp Peary on this channel, and it's a very important place, and it's very relevant. Camp Peary is an approximately 9,000-acre U.S. military reservation in York County near Williamsburg, Virginia, officially referred to as an Armed Forces Experimental Training Activity under the authority of the DoD. Camp Peary hosts a covert CIA training facility known as the Farm. And that, my friends, is why it's relevant. CIA clowns the Farm. And of course, Q has referenced the Farm quite a few times. This is a very important area, which is used to train officers of the CIA's Directorate of Operations, as well as those of the DIA's Defense Clandestine Service, among other intelligence entities. Why must you make me think like a conspiracy theorist? Says this guy. So good luck, fellow citizens. Your participation will be recorded in your permanent record. So very interesting stuff going on in the same area at the same time. Well, boys and girls, as you already know, nothing beats a coincidence like more coincidences. We're back on ZeroHedge. This was from the 18th. F-18 fighters to drop live bombs on Florida swamp this weekend. According to a statement published by Naval Air Station Jacksonville, the U.S. Navy is preparing to conduct live bombing raids with fighter jets at a training facility in the middle of Florida this weekend. The Navy will fly McDonnell Douglas FA-18 Hornets from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. So I guess that would make it 11 from Saturday through Sunday, dropping live and inert bombs at Pine Castle Range Complex in the Ocala National Forest. Residents in surrounding communities will hear explosions and loud noises, especially fighter jets traveling at subsonic speeds. Here's a 2012 video of an F-18 jet 5 miles from the Pine Castle Range completing a tactical turn, and you can check those out if you'd like. I'll link this article down below. Now, I know I'm going to get a whole lot of folks saying, Patrick, this stuff happens all the time. It's a total non-story. I don't know why you're wasting my time. Except it wasn't. Now, this happened last year, and of course this happens a lot. This is a bombing range. This is what they do. And so these Ocala residents are very familiar with this. However, I want to point out that last year they reported that this seemed different. When they were bombing last year, this was actually shaking them out of their homes. This was something that residents in Ocala, who are very well aware of Pine Castle and their numerous bombs, they probably hear these noises all the time. These people were being shaken out of their homes. And so this was something even to them. So yes, this exercise was done last year. It could be a totally routine thing. I just find it very interesting that they're doing it all over again on this very busy weekend. Residents from Volusia Lake and Marion counties will hear fighter jets and bombs throughout the weekend. Residents as far as Seminole and northern Orange County could also hear explosions. During bombing periods, wildlife may be temporarily displaced. Yikes! That's a really nice way of saying, we just bombed your crib. What kind of wildlife are they displacing? The gators and the Jacksonville, they got the jaguars out there. The displaced jaguars. Where the jaguars are going to stay? Use extra caution when driving around through the Ocala National Forest and surrounding areas, the Navy said. Okay, so this is going to probably spread out a bunch of wildlife. And like I said, the Ocala residents are probably very familiar with this, especially after last year. But once again, another very interesting timing for this kind of event to happen. But wait, there's more. From US Army.mil, this was from the 16th, same day as a previous article. Atlantic Intracoastal Waterway route closed for gate restoration. And this is from South Mills, North Carolina, which is oddly enough all jammed up with their GPS right now. Due to required maintenance, the Dismal Swamp Canal on the Atlantic Intracoastal Waterway between North Carolina and Virginia has been shut off to vessel traffic. Work crews from U.S. Facilities Incorporated, the primary services contractor for Norfolk District, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, removed 2 South Mills Lock Canal gates last week, assisted by subcontractors W.O. Grubb Crane Rental and Chesapeake Bay Diving Incorporation. The $525,000 rehabilitation project is expected to take 90 days. Perfect timing. And for those of you who are not aware, Q has, of course, referenced the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. That was indeed one of our Red Castle. You may remember the Red Castle, Green Castle references. This was referring to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And, of course, they build a lot of things, dams, and they work on waterways all the time. And, of course, they were partially being contracted to build the wall on the border. So that was our Red Castle, Green Castle, if you're not familiar, or if you're wanting to relate that to QAnon. As a result, the locks at South Mills and Deep Creek, Virginia, which cover Route 2 on the AIWW's Dismal Swamp Canal, sounds pleasant, have temporarily ceased operations. Repairs are estimated to be completed by the end of March, before the spring migration of vessels going north for the summer, said Joel Scussel, Norfolk District's Atlantic Intracoastal Waterway Project Manager. There are no spare gates for locks on the Dismal Swamp Canal. This requires us to shut the canal, then remove, refurbish, and replace the gates during the slower months. Okay, so no boats going through the canal. We notified the Coast Guard, and we will not let any vessels in at South Mills Lock or Deep Creek Lock until this refurbishment is complete. Okay, so the air shutdown, airwave shutdown. We got some bombings going on. We got lots of planes in the sky. And now the waterways appear to be shut down, at least for the Dismal Swamp Canal. Now, right about now, you might be saying, Mystic Mac, there's too many coincidences. I can't take it anymore. It's just so pursuity. To which I say, buck up, Patriot. I got more for you. I ain't done with you yet. Now we're taking you to Osage County, Missouri. And of course, we just talked about Missouri, but now we're talking about southeastern Missouri, which is a totally different place. And of course, Osage County, Missouri, smack dab in the Midwest. They don't get earthquakes out there. No, this isn't San Francisco. We're talking about the Midwest, where the risk level is very low. As a matter of fact, in Osage County, total number of earthquakes since 1931, a whopping total of 0. And the probability within the next 50 years is 0.38. There's still a better chance of an earthquake happening than Elizabeth Warren being a Native American. But not only did it happened 6 times. 6 very small earthquakes in the past 5 hours in southeastern Missouri. They're all clustered in the same area south of Sikeston and have no reports of being felt. The largest being a small magnitude 2.7, but 5 of these happened in the same hour. Okay, so these are indeed small earthquakes, but the fact that they're happening in a place that hasn't had one since 1931, and it just so happens to be happening this weekend, might be of note. Now, I want to thank an Anon who sent me this. This is a screenshot of the area right here. 3 kilometers. I'm seeing that southwest of South Hutchinson. Okay, so southeastern Missouri, where they just don't get a lot of quakes, now all of a sudden got 6. Well, I wonder if this has anything to do with it. This is the Hutchinson facility, the salt mine. Think Fort Knox, buried 650 feet underground. Well, we're not going to read through this whole thing here, but let me take you here. Our Hutchinson salt mine facility was established in the unused portions of a working mine during the height of Cold War nuclear concerns as a safe haven for sensitive information and assets. Since 1959, Fortune 500 companies and small businesses alike have stored here from every industry around the world. Underground vaults and storage is recognized as a leader in secure storage for the motion picture and entertainment industry. Safely tucked away from prying eyes and disaster, more than 1.7 million square feet of space holds untold millions of items in cool, dry conditions. That is roughly equivalent to 35 football fields encased in solid stone, more than 45 stories below the ravages of man and nature. That which you value will be preserved here perpetually. It's called forever storage. It's arguably the world's largest time capsule. Yet still more craziness, this time coming from Hawaii. This is the Honolulu Star Advertiser. Suspect in fatal shooting of 2 HPD officers. Massive Diamond Head fire had troubled past. And this was from the 19th. Witness Ian Felix was on the way to work with his mom earlier this morning near the base of Diamond Head when he spotted an injured Honolulu police officer. The lady was already bleeding a lot, he said. Probably she's around 70. About 10 officers were on the scene when Felix applied a tourniquet on the officer to help stop the bleeding. So none of the 10 officers were able to do that. There must have been a lot going on. And then we have this odd timing, 1:45 p.m. Jerry J. Hannell, the 69-year-old suspect in the fatal shooting of 2 Honolulu police officers and the massive neighborhood fire in Diamond Head, was slated to go to trial for misuse of a 9/11 emergency telephone service, court records show. Police are not conducting a manhunt and have told Hibiscus Drive neighbors that Hannell is likely dead inside one of the burned houses. Hannell, who was arrested for allegedly committing the misdemeanor crime on May 28th, had pleaded not guilty to the charge. While making a false complaint or reporting false information to 911 is only a misdemeanor, the charge is punishable by up to a year in jail and a fine of up to $2,000. Okay, so it wasn't like this guy was going to go away for life. But obviously, this led to some really big stuff here. Now, in the misuse of May 911 complaint, Hannell's address is listed as 3015 Hibiscus Drive, which is where today's chaotic events reportedly began. One of the complaints listed his birth date as May 22nd, 1950, and describes him as a 6-foot European male weighing 180 pounds. Now, what's interesting here is that originally there was a gas leak that was reported. Let me take you down here to 12:37 p.m. A gas leak has been reported on Hibiscus Drive where 2 Honolulu police officers were shot and multiple houses are on fire. The gas company is expected to turn the gas off in the area. And of course, that made me think of these Detroit evergreen stories that I just recently reported to you, where we had a couple explosions in Detroit. Now, they may not be related, but those were also gas fire explosions, and they had these weird connections and weird stories that just kept getting weirder. Then there was a gun involved. I don't want to take you back to that, but if you're not familiar with the story, go check out my Detroit Evergreen 1 and 2 videos where we talk about this. And here we have this guy who was calling 911. And of course, like I just showed you there, the punishment for this isn't super huge. Could be a year in jail, but often that is not going to be that long. So it seems like a very strange reason to go killing 2 police officers and setting a neighborhood on fire over. So it definitely looks like something is up here in Honolulu, because this was a very small charge leading to something much, much bigger. And of course, tons of homes got set on fire, and they're still dealing with this. And like I just pointed out, these gas lines were a very curious thing. And of course, when you got to shut the gas lines down, you also got to shut down the electric lines. And I think that might even be the bigger story, considering all the events that we've talked about thus far in this video. So we will keep you posted on that. I also want to mention that they said that the guy's nickname was Yarda. And I'm not sure, maybe some of you are more familiar with that term. I've heard it before, but very vaguely. I'm not real familiar with it. But I had kind of been led to assume that that is sort of a nickname for a dummy. or somebody who doesn't really know what they're doing. Yarda. Anyway, let me take you back to this story that's unfolding in the Virginia area. And more importantly, back to me! No, I'm just kidding, but I did tweet this. Looks like Pelosi ordered some new pens. Properly disposal could be a typo. And I'm referencing this January 19th tweet from the U.S. Marines. Rounds. Explosive ordnance disposal, Marines with, and then we have a long title right there, and U.S. Air Force airmen place multiple links of 50 caliber rounds on the ground for properly disposal during a Code H destruction operation at an EOD range in Kuwait. Okay, so we get a lot of tweets like this from all of our armed forces, and it may be nothing at all. But the first thing that I think a lot of us thought, and I know that because a lot of you guys sent me this, was this odd relation to the look of these shells, and of course the way that Nancy Pelosi's fancy impeachment pens kind of look. Yeah, those look a little bit like rounds too, a little bit like Ordnance. And of course, here is a great picture right here, thanks to the Anon who sent me this, showing the close comparison there, right? So, could this be a shout out and callback? I don't really know, but we found this very curious. The next thing I found curious, of course, was the spelling of Ordnance. Now, oftentimes, this can be spelled with an I, Ordinance, but I do want to say this. This is not incorrect. Ordnance is actually correct. Ordnance and Ordinance have a slight difference. Ordnance usually being in reference to an order, and of course ordnance usually referring to explosions or projectiles or things like this, things like bullets and missiles. So it's not necessarily incorrect, but it's also not incorrect to spell this with an I, as many people do, and I think a lot of you guys picked that out too. So was this a particular way of referencing Nancy Pelosi? We don't really know, but it is very, very curious. Now let me take you over here real quick. This is military.com just to show you what a U.S. Army Code H is. It's essentially a demolition, as you can see. But as you can see also, military.com has it spelled as Ordinance, which is a little bit more ordinary. And again, I'm going to clarify that neither one of these are incorrect, but definitely interesting. So we've got these pen references. We've got this spelling, which seems to direct us to the word Nance. Is this a reference to Nancy Pelosi? Was Nancy Pelosi referencing something with those pens? After all, they've been making the rounds, making some really big news, right? Well, this isn't the only thing that we've seen in reference to this spelling. We had this from the 19th, from the Air Force. And of course, the EOD that the U.S. Marines was referencing is explosive disposal ordnance. Airmen are often assigned to some of the most dangerous missions and perform tactically harrowing, technically demanding tasks in dynamic environments worldwide. And of course, the U.S. Air Force is referencing the Department of Defense. Always sharpening their skills, U.S. Air Force airmen from the Explosive Ordnance Team on Aviano Air Base, Italy, maneuver a micro-tactical ground robot during a training exercise. Okay, so like I said, nobody has misspelled this here. They've used it correctly, but I just do want to show you the juxtaposition between that spelling and military.com putting the I in there. Is there something in that missing I? Is there something referencing Nance? You tell me, but I just want to point it out. Now, the next curious thing I want to point out is the use of the word properly right here. 50 caliber rounds on the ground for properly disposal. Well, normally the correct English way would be to say for proper disposal. So it could have just been a mistake, right? And of course, I'm willing to, assume that that could be the case. But I do want to point out that these are military accounts and they don't usually make a lot of mistakes because in the military, usually things go through all kinds of cross-checking. That being said, could very well have just been an autocorrect error, or who knows. But there seems to be an extra LY right there. And I just suggested this down here, LY, and they take you to a Wikipedia page of this right here. Is this a reference to the LY-60, a family of Chinese missiles developed by the Shanghai Academy of Science and Technology, largely based on the Italian Selenia Aspide missile? We were just talking about Italy over there with the Department of Defense tweet. All right, so we don't really know if that's the case. I just wanted to go ahead and propose that this could be a possibility, but the LY-60 is indeed Ordnance. One more coincidence, if you will, and this comes by way of dry eye in the sky anon. This is from Tasmanian.com. The Air Force's Global Lightning program will test all SpaceX Starlink satellites. Now, this article was from the 5th, and you may remember from Florida on the 6th, SpaceX shot off another one of those Falcon 9s, and this is what it's in regards to. SpaceX was awarded a $28 million contract from United States Air Force Research Laboratory in 2018 to test and assess Starlink satellites by connecting their broadband internet to military platforms. They also awarded millions to several different satellite communication companies, including terminal and software developers. The U.S. military wants to experiment with how space-based internet services might enhance their multi-domain operations. Officials stated that we're not focused just on any one company. Our intent is to characterize the performance and understand the pros and cons of all the commercial systems when used on military platforms. These MDO operations will require moving vast quantities of data between the 5 domains of warfare: at sea, in the air, in outer space, and cyberspace. Therefore, the military needs a reliable communication system to protect and defend the country from potential threats. Space-based internet is faster and more reliable than our current internet infrastructure. A SpaceX satellite can beam internet connectivity at the speed of light from space, unlike fiber optic cables and ground antenna towers that tend to lag. SpaceX designed Starlink to connect end users with low latency, high bandwidth broadband services by providing continual coverage around the world using a network of thousands of satellites in low Earth orbit. Okay, so once again, interesting timing, and I find it real interesting that this happened at the beginning of the month because it seems like it would give them some time to kind of set up shop and get a few things done in anticipation for a possible upcoming threat. Now, this likely involves a lot of 5G technology, which I think starts to get into some really, really scary stuff. But I do think it's important to know that this was sent up along with the Falcon 9 and that this is all being done by SpaceX. So I'm not really sure what SpaceX's role is in all this. I've always been a little bit wary, if you will, of Elon Musk and Tesla, but it's really, really hard to say exactly what's being done here, but it is definitely interesting, and it definitely does seem to be connectipated. I'm going to leave you with one last coincidence from mymodernmet.com. Train carrying corn has massive spill. Transforms tracks into a yellow brick road. And look at that right there. Corn spilled on the tracks by my house. The ducks and deer haven't found it yet. On a cold winter day in Crystal, Minnesota, Mike Parker noticed an unusual sight near his house. The neighboring train tracks were completely covered in golden kernels of corn as far as the eye could see. And best of all, this magical sight resembled the fantastical yellow brick road from The Wizard of Oz. After snapping a picture of the tracks, Parker would naturally shared it on Twitter. Users there thought his photo was fake. Yeah, it does kind of look fake, right? And here was the crux of the matter here. The spill occurred on the Canadian Pacific Rail line and stretched about 2,000 feet long. There's speculation that the amount of corn lost to the tracks was about 900 bushels or about $3,500 worth of the grain. It turns out that very few animals got to enjoy the bounty of corn kernels that awaited them. Railroad workers used a high rail vacuum truck to suck up the spill and took the golden path with them. And if you see down here, that's more of a realistic looking picture right there. But very, very interesting given all the references of corn that we have. It's actually quite beautiful. And of course, if you imagine they sucked it up with a vacuum, I'm sure it's full of rocks. So be real careful if you're eating corn in the Midwest this weekend. All right, Patriots, those are your coincidences for the day. I'm going to leave you with this tweet from the POTUS, who tweeted this on the 19th, but the best is yet to come. And it was actually adding on to a previous tweet in regards to Paul Krugman over there at the New York Times. And if you're not aware, Paul Krugman just underwent an ordeal earlier last week where he was talking about how he suspected somebody hacked into his server and put porn onto his server, and he was trying to blame it on QAnon, saying, "I think I got QAnon." whatever that means. Anyway, this was a response to that, and of course POTUS was clowning him, and it looks like he got QAnon twice, because POTUS says, but the best is yet to come, and we've seen that said in Q2867. This was from back in February of 2019, and this YouTube link took you to a rally where the POTUS was driving by in his motorcade, and they were honking at the people waving on the street, and Q had said, are we having fun yet? The best is yet to come. So another proof up in your face. This time Paul Krugman gets QAnon'd twice. That's all I got for you today. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. Thanks to all of you who do that already. If you've not joined me on one of my other platforms, please do so. They're all linked down below. This is my DropSpace right here. My BitChute, my Gab, my Twitter, and my Brighteon are also down there below. My P.O. box is down there if you want to send something old school. If you got info for me, please email me. My email is down there, and my Patreon is down below if you'd like to support the channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. All those links are down below for you in the video description. And until next time, stay funky.